Recording in progress. So for the second half here, we kind of went over briefly the exercise for today. So you're basically going to be doing either the Cornell rabbit or the still life. Instructions for it are right here underneath of it. The lights to use. We also give you the breakdowns, which I showed you guys. As far as the templates go for the still life and the rabbit reference are inside the templates. You just need to make sure you turn on the correct reference image you're going to be doing. So by default, the Cornell rabbit's going to be there. Turn that off if you're doing the still life. Your render goes underneath. Don't forget the watermark, 15%. Fill in all of the light information. Where it says diffuse samples, camera AA samples, fill out the first one. You don't need to fill the others out. I keep meaning to update this. But fill out all other information. So for those of you doing the Cornell rabbit, it doesn't have an extra backlight. So you can just put NA down there, not applicable. Does that make sense? Questions about the template? If everybody's good, save as in Photoshop. Then you have to click the copy, save as copy button so you can get it to save out as a targa, which is crazy, but there you have it. All right, so for the portrait, you're going to pick one of the reference images that has at least 2 lights. Must have more than one. And for our purposes, a light is also considered a reflector. So if you've got a light and a reflector, that still counts as 2 lights. Add as many as you need. You will probably have to use light linking also for the portrait, because a lot of times you will either get too much light from your key light hitting the backdrop or not enough of it. So usually what we wind up doing is unlinking the backdrop from the key light, make a light separate for itself. That way you can control it completely independent of all the other lights. So you can get a dark bluish background. You can get a light blue background. You can get a background that matches the reference that the photographer has. Okay, a couple of things about this. First, the portrait already has an AI standard surface on the character, on the human head. Do not change it or it won't render correctly, or it will not render correctly. The backdrop also has a material on it too. So for the portrait, you do not need to change materials. They're there already. For the rabbit or the still life, you must assign the AI standard to all the geometry, turn off the turn off the specular weight and set the base color value at 0.5. Verify color management enabled. Cast shadows turned on by default. Doesn't hurt to check. And those are really the only kind of little gotchas that are in the assignments. All right, so the only thing we haven't gone over is basically light linking. Light linking can be found under Windows, Relationship Editor, light linking, and then you have a choice of either something called light-centric or object-centric. And basically, light linking shows up like 2 side-by-side outliners. On the left side, if you choose light-centric, well, let me fire up Maya. It's a lot easier to show you. And while I'm at it, I may as well bring up at least one of the scenes. All right. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to do a very simple scene. Plane. Couple of polyspheres. Just to show light linking real quick. All right, so whenever you're working, don't forget, if you're using Arnold, assign an AI standard surface to everything. Shift T, because anything by default that you create in Maya is going to give you Lambert by default. So you want to do Shift T once you've got all your geometry selected. Under Assign New Material, under Arnold Shader, AI standard surface. Specular weight gets turned off. Base color value gets changed from 0.8 to 0.5. 50% gray. All right, so what I'm going to do is just go ahead and create a couple of Arnold area lights, really. Let's go one here on this side, one here on this side. Let's rotate that one. And then just for light fun, let's do one 90 degrees. Oops, negative 90. All right, so basically I have 3 area lights in here. And by default, of course, it's going to be way too weak. So let's give our area lights a little bit of punch. Okay, there's the back one. Let's give the side one some life. And the other side one. All right, so I got 3 lights in there. What happens if I want to, say, for example, unlink the sphere on the left and the sphere on the right from the back sphere light? So only that back sphere light controls the center sphere. So to do that, I can go into light linking, which is under Windows. Oops, Windows, Relationship Editor, light linking. I have something called light centric or object centric. Let's go light centric. Like I said, it brings up my relationship editor, which is basically like 2 side-by-side outliners. The one on the left lists lights. The one on the right will list the objects. All right, so this is light shape 1. This is light shape 2 on the right. And light shape 3 is in the back. So if I click on each light, notice that it highlights everything on the right side, which means every time you create a light, it is automatically linked up to everything in your scene. Just like when you create a new object, it's automatically linked up to everything that's in the scene already, like lights. Now, to control that, so let's see, we know this is area light 3. This is sphere 1. Let's see if we can figure this out. So what I want to do is unlink. All right, sphere 1, sphere 2, sphere 3. Okay. So area light 1, which is that, I want to unlink from sphere 1. So all I have to do is click on the light. You can see all the lights are linked to everything. Click on the light and just click off on sphere 3. So now you can see sphere 1 is no longer getting any light from the left. If I want to link it up again, all I have to do is click on it, and now it's back. So let's unlink that again. There's sphere 3, which is this sphere all the way on the left. Sphere 2 is all the way on the right, and sphere 1 is in the middle. So now area light 1 is unlinked from sphere 1. All right, so area light 2, which is this one over here, I want to unlink that from, let's unlink it from sphere 2, which is all the way on the right here. So area light 2, unlink it from sphere 2. And area light 3, let's unlink that from sphere 3. Now, to put them back, all I have to do is highlight them again. And now they're all linked back up the way they were. There we go. Sometimes all the shadows weren't showing up, so now we're back. All right, now, a lot of times you may not be linking a specific light to a specific piece of geometry like that, but you may be linking or unlinking a light from a backdrop because you don't want it to have an effect. So right now, if I don't want this light to see the backdrop, all I have to do is unlink it from the plane. So now that plane is only being illuminated by the two side area lights. Looks a whole lot different. So you can do that with any of the lights. Now, everything's all linked back up. Let's stop by PR. Let's open it again. Just do a quick render. Everything's there. If I open this up in object centric, all it's going to do, and I can change it anytime in the relationship editor, or I can just go Windows, relationship editors, light linking, object centric. It's going to show me objects on the left, lights on the right. So I can go what lights are linked up to my ground. All I have to do is click on the plane and I can easily see they're all linked up. So this is an easy way to use it. I personally prefer lights on the left, objects on the right. Does it matter? No, as long as you keep track of what you're doing. So this is something that real world lighting designers would kill for, to be able to have light not hit a certain object. So let's put it to use, because we're going to need it for the Cornell rabbit. So what I'm going to do is just set my project to the Cornell rabbit that I downloaded, and it happens to be in my downloads. There it is, Still Life Maya project, Arnold. Click set, file open, Cornell rabbit, new. There we go. All right, so just like with project 2, I personally prefer to work from perspective, render from the render cam so I can see what's going on. All right, so before I get started, let's take a look at what I should do here. All right, so we're not in the portrait, we're in the rabbit. So let's select the geometry. And there's basically a rabbit and a backdrop. Going to select them both. I could just come in here and marquee select both of them in the viewport. Shift T to assign a new material. Specular weight to 0. Base color, 0.5. Wow, go away. All right, now I'm going to save as. Make sure it's an MB. That works for me. All right, so that part's set. Already set my Maya project folder, opened up the scene. Now we're going to work on one light at a time. Let's talk a little bit about what we have going on here. So let's go to the reference images, which we have here. And let's open these up. Actually, let's open all the reference up in the preview program. And let's bring up color just in case I want to adjust the exposure so I can show you a couple things. All right, so this is the key light. Where's it coming from? $45, right. Okay. So how are you making that determination? Okay. All right. One way we can tell is let's go to they're kind of like positional guides. So we can kind of see, yep, you're pretty close. It actually looks like it's, well, if it were 90, it would be here. But this looks like it's about 60, somewhere around in there. All right, so it's coming from the right. That light is affecting both the rabbit and the backdrop. How do we know? Well, we got light on the rabbit, we got light on the backdrop. You can tell my light is kind of close to the ground because it's brighter here than it is anywhere else in the shot. All right, so fill light. Little hard to see here, but let's crank up the exposure just so we can talk about where it's coming from. Let me turn off the lights. All right, so where's the light coming from in this one? Yeah, it sort of looks like that. Let's go see. So almost 90, definitely a lot closer to 90 than the key light. Off to the side a little bit, probably like 75, 70, 75, 80, somewhere around there. All right, rim light. Let's crank that up a little so we can see it a little better. So rim light, what is that affecting? Somewhere around there, yep. Maybe even not quite 135, but probably 110, 120. So what else do we see here? Is it affecting the backdrop? Okay, so this light, we can say we're going to need light linking because we do not want that rim light visible in the backdrop. It will basically get in the way of the final version of the shot. So light linking for sure on this one. And then all lights together, that's how we can kind of verify everything that we just said. All right, so these are really what I'm interested in when I start out. So this will give me an idea of where I need to place this light rotationally. And this will give me an idea of where it is as far as elevation. How high up does it go? Now, don't bring these in as image planes and try and get it exact. It's not worth it. You'll spend more time doing that than you will putting the light in, rendering it, and positioning it. So first thing we're going to do, let's start with the key light. Let's open up Arnold. Let's bring our reference in. Open image. There's my first reference image. There we go. All right, so follow the directions, create a key light. It's going to be an AI area light. That's pretty simple. All right, I can see it definitely needs to be rotated. It's aimed in the wrong direction. So let's rotate it around. A little closer. Let's kind of rotate it too. Oops. All right, let's render that, see what we get. Make sure you're in the render cam. Well, it's sort of positioned, sort of close. I can tell because I got a lot of bright light here. Looks like my shadows here are kind of close. From this, I need to add more light, definitely, so that I can figure out where it needs to go to get an accurate position. So I could go to my standard 100, but that's no go. That's way too much. So I'm just going to go 10. I can tell my light is a little bit off. My shadows are a little bit longer. They also kind of they're not quite as level with the ground plane. They're a little fatter. But positionally, the light is fairly close. All right, so let's talk a little bit about workflow while we're at this stage. So workflow. You're going to work in what we call lighting passes. What that means is the first time through, you're going to get about 80 to 85% of the way there. Stop. I know it's tempting to obsess about it. As artists, we could stay on it forever to try and get a pixel perfect. But the problem with that is you never move forward. So the idea is to get it positioned, get it to about a 75 even, 75, 80, 85% of the way there. Stop. Move on to the next light. All right, so this is the key light. Next, turn off the key light, put it on a layer, turn visibility off. Let's not do that. Okay, now we're going to go fill light. You're going to go 80, 85% for the fill light. Stop, put it on a layer. Q5, we're going to move on to the rim light. 80, 85% of the way there. Once you're done, put that one on a layer. Visibility off. Go back to the key. get it 85, 90%, incremental steps. The reason I want you to stop is obviously you can obsess about one light forever. And two, you get kind of stale moving and doing the same light all the time. So you're on to another light, a different position, a different set of problems. This way you're constantly looking at something different. Because a lot of times as artists, we work on stuff and we go, this sucks. And you walk away from it. You come back about a half hour, hour later, and you go, it's not that bad. You know, so we're our own worst critics, and we can easily make ourselves get stuck in the mud. So work in passes. Go through as many as you need to do this. And, you know, after like 2 passes, turn them all on and compare it with the final version. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how close you are. But at that point, take note. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's probably your key light that still needs to be adjusted a little. So what you would do is turn off all the other lights, go back, work on the key, just tweak it, fine tune it, try and get it as close as you can to the reference. Does that make sense? Work in passes, keep moving forward. This kind of goes for the portrait too when we get to the portrait. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to work on the key light. We're going to get that really close. We'll stop. We'll add in another light. We'll try to adjust that in relationship to the key. Then we might move back to the key and, you know, get that shadow a little closer, get the intensity a little closer, get the position of it a little closer. Then maybe go back, adjust the fill, adjust the rim, adjust the back, whatever it is you've got going on. It's the same kind of workflow. Questions? Yes, I'm recording it, so it's in there. What I can do though is if you want that, just sign in to Zoom and I'll upload it to the chat. So if anybody else wants it, feel free.
I can download the screenshot and upload it to Discord if you want me to,
Actually,
since I'm already in here.
I appreciate that, but the problem is, technically, you guys are supposed to get the information before online does, and you get it live. They basically are going to be expected to watch this and then get the screenshot for themselves. I'd rather have them watch the lecture and get the screenshot than to put it up there without context. If that makes sense.
I gotcha. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No. Lecture. Yep. That one is only for the Thursday afternoon Zoom session. All right, there you go. Okay. So let's take this and work on it. All right, so the whole idea is what's going on here. All right, my shadows are fairly close. My shadows look a little long. So I'm kind of thinking that I need to move it down a little bit. Now, when you start adjusting the light, adjust it in one direction, let it catch up in the render before you start moving too many things. This way, if you move it, you don't like it, you can Z back. All right, so let's see what happens if I raise this light up a little bit. So now if I raise it up, my shadows definitely got shorter, but I kind of lost where I was. So let me Z back. And let me just raise it just ever so slightly. And it looks like it's rotated just a little too much. So let's rotate it back a little bit closer. Right, definitely not there yet, but certainly closer. Looks like I could use a little more light intensity. All right, so I'm going to call that about 75% of the way there. It's positioned, it's okay. One thing I suggest is when you start doing lights, label them so you know what they are. Key light. There's my key. Let's save in Maya. I'm going to take that light, put it onto a display layer, because what I want to do is turn it off and start working on the fill light. So don't forget, display layers are under layer editor, which is usually paired with the channel box. Select your light, select your object, click on the icon. It will create a new layer based on your selection. I'm going to rename this key light. And if I turn visibility off, it's just like turning the light switch on that light off. Anytime I want to get it back, just turn that on. Let's save. And let's move on to the next reference. All right, so really kind of hard to see, but I can see it's coming from the opposite side. It's going to be an AI area light over there. And one thing I didn't address in my key light was My key light might need to be a little larger. I can fix that in the next pass. This one, I want to be kind of cognizant of how big that is in relationship to the subject and the other light. So let's create a new Arnold area light. There we go. Pull it up out of the ground. And let's scale it in a little too. And I'm also looking at where that pointer for the area light is aimed. Looks like it goes right center of the rabbit's head. Let's see how that looks. Looks like it needs to be a little higher. And let's aim it down a little. And let's render. Well, I can definitely tell it's a little bit off. I can see the shadow move on the leg. But positionally, it's not that far off. I'm looking at the brightness of it. It's not too bad. Looks like I might need to move it over just a touch. That shadow right there. Need a little more shadow. Okay, that's a little closer. At this point, I'm going to pretend that it's roughly about 80%, 75%, 80% of the way there. And all I'm doing is just comparing height, rotation, scale, position, looking at it when I render with the shadows. If I need more shadow, I need to put that light more towards the back. That way I'll get more shadow around the front. If I need less shadow in the front, I'm bringing that light a little closer to the camera so I get less light or less shadow. And it's off just a little bit, but it's not a showstopper. All right, so let's label that light. That's going to be my fill. Going to throw it onto a display layer, just like I did with the key light. Anybody got any questions so far? The workflow makes sense? Take your time. Like I said, don't be afraid of turning the light off, going back and working on it individually. All right, now we've got all that in there. Let's save because it's Maya and it's evil. All right, next light, it's going to be the rim light. So let's load that in. There we are. And let's see, where are we positionally? All right, so definitely almost 135-ish. Looks like the cone is big enough to take in the entire rabbit, it looks like. And it also looks like it's almost parallel with the body, the chest of the rabbit. Now, there's a couple things about the spotlight, if you remember from the demo on Wednesday. Spotlight can be aimed in a couple of different ways. What are they? Pressing T, that'll give you the little, basically, center of interest. You can aim it there. What else can you do? Yep. So I could go into basically panels, look through selected with it selected, and aim it just like a camera. Which actually I might wind up doing, because then I can see how much of that cone is actually surrounding the rabbit. Just to be different. And it'll also help me kind of get an idea of how big I need to make the cone. So what I'm going to do is create a spotlight. And since it's not an Arnold light, I got to go under Create, Lights, Spotlight. And since it's selected, let's look through selected. There's my little, let's kind of zoom out a little. We're in the rabbit. All right, so what does that look like? Let's go outside and look at it. Perspective. Let's see. It looks like I probably need to come around to the back a little bit more. I guess more like that. And definitely that cone needs to be bigger so I can get more of the rabbit in there. So let's look through selected, zoom out just a little. Looks like I need to bring it around back even more. It looks like it's going almost through that ear on the left. All right, what's that gonna look like? So let's go back here. All right, not too bad. Now I need to make it bigger, that's for sure. So what I'm going to do is, let's go into the lights attributes and let's make that cone angle bigger. Now, kind of looks like my light's a little on the high side here. So I got it kind of roughed in looking through it. I'm going to go back and do my favorite, which is the T key, because then I can kind of keep the center of interest where I want it, which is right about here with the rabbit. So let's bring that around here a little bit. And let's lower it a little. All right, so having done that, let's see what we get when we render. All right, so far, So good, almost done. Looks great, right? Give it a little more intensity. All right, so we'll get a couple things going on here. Definitely got the light sort of positioned where I want it. What do I need to do from this point? Okay, adjust the intensity. What do I need to do to it? Little darker? Brighter. Okay, so let's crank up the intensity a little.
You need to remove the light linking from the ground.
Right, so Kenny said, don't forget light linking. We got to remove that from the ground. So for that, we need to go into Windows, relationship editors, light linking, light centric. Now, well, what I'm going to do before I do that is, this is a rim light. So now let's do light linking. There we go, rim light. Now, here's a bug with light linking. So I click on the rim, and then I go, oh, I forgot to expand my group. So I click on the group, and it doesn't look like anything is linked up inside. Don't panic. Go to another light, come back to it, and now it will show. Did everybody see that? That is a bug with the display. I don't know why. It's been there forever. Maya just doesn't think it's important enough to fix. But as long as you know what a workaround is. So again, you come in here, go to light linking, light centric. By default, your group is going to be collapsed. Easiest way to do this is expand the group and then select your light. It will show accurately. So now what I want to do is, let's render, and I want to unlink that rim light from the backdrop. Once I've done that, let's render again. And now my light is not affecting the backdrop. That makes sense. Now we have one other problem though, which we did not anticipate. What do you see? The ground. Now, we've already unlinked the light, so it is not the rim light causing that issue. Anybody got an idea what it might be? Area light? Well, the area light's linked, but they're all hidden. So we're not seeing any area light. Reflection? Yep. Actually, technically, since we have reflectivity turned off, it's actually bounce light. It's indirect bounce light. So what you need to do is, in each light that you have an issue like this, you need to go into visibility. So you have to select the light, go into the attributes, go down to Arnold, and down under visibility, you will see indirect. Turn that off. It's not diffuse, it's indirect. So now we are more or less getting the same result that we have in the reference. So far, so good, right? One more problem. Look at the reference. Look at what we have.
The back leg is not lit.
Yeah, the back is not lit, the back leg, the tail. what happened? They weren't there either before we started unlinking stuff. We just didn't notice it because we were working on one thing at a time. Anybody know what's going on with this? So raise the light up a little. Okay, increase the cone angle. It's going to make the light spread out a little more. So let's increase it, see what we get. A little bit. Still didn't help though. And it's gigantic. So I think I had that at 62. Let's do that. Let's go back to that. All right, so I'll give you a hint. By default, every light is casting a shadow. The rabbit is shadowing itself. The body of the rabbit is blocking light that is normally visible here, but the rabbit is casting a shadow on that back leg. And the head is casting a shadow on the back. The tail, the back part, the haunches are casting a shadow on the tail, so you can't see it. So this is one of the rare times where you turn off shadows in a light. Now, another time might be if you want to use a kick light and you only want it to accent something, but you don't really want it to cast shadows for anything else that it might hit. So what we can do is, with the light selected, go down under the spotlight attributes, go down under Arnold, don't go under shadows. Those are Maya shadows. Remember, this is a Maya light. Ignore that. Go to Arnold, cast shadows, and turn off cast shadows. So now, as soon as I do that, shadows on, back ear doesn't have highlight, the tail doesn't have highlight, the feet don't have highlights. With that off, now I got it. And now I can see, okay, it looks like mine's a little too bright. So let's turn that intensity down a little. Bring it around to the back just a little bit more. A little more around to the front, maybe. Okay, a little closer. And I probably about 80–85% of the way there with that. Now it looks like it could be just a touch brighter. All right, so 85% of the way. What I would do now is throw this on a layer, turn it off, go back, do the key light. But for sake of brevity, I'm going to say, all right, I made a couple passes. Let's see what it looks like when I turn all the lights on. So first thing I'm going to do, make sure I have that light on a layer. That's going to be my rim light. Let's save it because it's Maya. And let's load in our final reference. All lights together. Let's turn all the other lights on and let's see how close we are. So yeah, it's a little off. Still got to work on, I think it's the key light that's mostly out. The rim light's not too bad. But that's a lot closer than I thought. Does that make sense? So now at this point, turn the other lights off, go back, take another stab at the key. That is the most important light. Spend time on that. Questions? So one light at a time, put them in, put them on a layer. This way you can control exactly what's visible. So at any time you can go back to a single light, solo it out, compare it with the reference. Kenny, got any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Questions, anybody at all? Good? All right. So now let's spend a little bit of time and talk about the portrait. Right, so I've got the portrait downloaded. Inside source images, there is the color map for the skin. The color map is already assigned in the material. Anybody who want to be a character designer, character artist, that is your future doing UVs and painting skin textures. Creepy. Right, so set your project to the portrait project folder we give you. If you don't do this, that skin texture will not show up. So portrait, there's the Maya project folder, set, file open, it'll take you right to the decimated head. Open. Again, with this, I like to work in perspective. There's the head. If you hit the 6 key on the keyboard, it should show textures. Oh, stop. If you hit 6, you see textures, that means you've got your project set right. If you hit 6 and it looks gray or white, close the scene, set your project, then open the scene again. That means Maya can't find it. All right, so you're not going to see any subsurface scattering effects, even if you turn lighting on in the viewport. Because remember, lighting in the viewport is an approximation. It's Maya trying to say, oh, this is sort of what it'll look like if you actually rendered it. Because Maya's real time is dreadful. It's better than play blast, but it's not much. All right. So with this, I'm going to do a save as so I don't destroy the original. And let's just save it, real simple name. And let's figure out which portrait we want to take a crack at. So which one shall we take a crack at? Which one? This one down here? The hard key with kicker. Anybody else good with that? All right. So let me open this up in Photoshop, and I'm going to crop that out because I don't think anybody has ever asked for that to be demoed. So that'll be fun. All right, let's go here. Well, let me just double check. Lesson 3, where are you? There we are. Portrait lighting guide. I don't think, no, I don't have that. I got that. Okay, that's a good choice then. So let's open it up. I've already got it. No, don't. So I'm going to open in Photoshop. All right, so in Photoshop, you want the crop tool, which looks like 2 right angles. When you select the crop tool, sometimes you can set the aspect ratio. Like right now, I've got this set to be square. I don't want that to be square because I really don't think that image is square. Let's see, though. No, definitely not square. So let's go width and height. And this will just let me manually do it. All right, so when you're all done, you've kind of got it lined up with all the little dotted lines. Just going to hit enter and do a save as. Because I don't want to delete the entire guide in case I want to go back and do something else instead. So you may start down and go, I want to do this. And you get to it and you go, I don't like that and I'm not feeling it. So try something else. But don't do that too many times or else you're going to be way behind. So I'm going to go File, Save As. Let's put that in with the rest of my portrait guide lighting. And since this is already a JPEG, I can save it as a Targa. Yay! A whole lot. JPEG is a file compression that is very lossy. So here's the way JPEG kind of works. So imagine the screen is an image and we want to compress it. When you want to compress something, a compression format, sort of like JPEG, will go, okay, what can I get rid of and what can I keep? Remember, it's all about pixels. So there's a whole bunch of white pixels here that are very similar. So if you, in your JPEG compression settings, say, I want to compress this a lot, maximum, what it's going to do is throw out as many of these white pixels as it can. On the detail, right? And keep just one to rebuild it when you open it up again. And it's going to do the same thing. Like for this gray, it's going to keep a couple of pixels, get rid of most of the others. And remember, when you're removing pixels, you're removing file size. So what happens is it goes through, makes a decision based on how much compression you want. It discards pixels, you save it, you close it. Tiny file size, send it out. Somebody else opens it up. When it opens it up, it expands and goes, it's got a reference table and it goes, okay, I need to create like, 7,000 really white pixels. And it creates them based off of that 1 or 2 pixels that are in there. The trouble is if you have a gradient like this gray may be seen, it may get confused when it's trying to compress this gray because of this. It's slightly darker and it may confuse it with that. That's why if you see a really bad artifacty JPEG, it's got splotchy looking pixels all over it. That's because it was a gradient and it couldn't make the decision which pixel to keep. So it just kind of went through and go, I think this is what you want.
Okay, so essentially, it's just Target is more detailed.
Target is less, out of all the formats, it is the next to EXR and next to HDR and a couple other high-end formats. It is one of the least lossy formats. PNG compresses a lot. TIFFs compress based on their algorithm. You can set up a TIFF to be lossless, but there's always issues when you transfer a TIFF file between a PC and a Mac. They don't like each other for whatever reason. But JPEGs, PNGs throw out that information. So here's the deal with the JPEG, open it up, rebuilt it. You make changes, you save it. It recompresses again. So it throws out pixels again. It may not throw out exactly the same pixels that it threw out the first time. So what happens is when you work with a JPEG, you open it, you save it, you compress it, you close it. You open it, you expand it, you work on it, you save it, you compress it, you close it. Do it 10 times, it degrades the image quality 50%. So anytime you get a JPEG from somebody, I always tell people, put it in Photoshop, save it as a PSD. That way you've stopped compressing it every time you work on it. And then you've got a master you can go to save out into another format. And if you have to save it back out as a JPEG, at least it's not degraded like 10 times since you had to work on it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's kind of why we use plus. Targets also have the ability to have RGB information plus a separate alpha channel. You can't have an alpha with a PNG and you can't have an alpha with a JPEG. So it has a lot to do with the bit depth of it, which is bigger than the other format. So that's kind of why we use Target. Yeah, not many people use, I mean, it's mostly from the compositing video days. Like when I did print work, we used nothing but TIFFs. When we always use uncompressed TIFFs. There's a way to do that. But like I said, the problem is you open TIFFs once in a while and it doesn't always take the color management. Like my color profile may have changed a little. So okay, you just, whatever you have to work with, you work with. All right, so that's why we use Target. And also with Target, we're going to save it out with the Target options. All right, so this is hard key. With kickers. Save. And here is your Target option. So by default, generally, you want to have 24 bits. That's RGB. Later on, when we get into texturing, yeah, we'll go 32, which will add an alpha channel in. But for right now, we don't need it. So why have all that information with nothing in it? It's only going to make the file size bigger for no benefit. So we click OK. Quit out of Photoshop. Why? Because Maya and Photoshop hate each other. And in a memory war, Maya usually loses. All right, so here is our reference. Now, I'm not going to put this into my render view in Arnold. There's really no point. I mean, I suppose I could do it, but I'd rather have it side by side. Because a lot of times if I take a JPEG, even after I convert it, it doesn't really have the bit information that a high-end EXR like Arnold's does. And it may look really washed out when I bring it in. Now, in theory, it shouldn't. In fact, let's see how that theory goes. Open image. Let's see what we can get away with here. Free portrait guide, kickers. Yeah. It likes EXRs. That is incredibly hilarious. What's that? No, it's opened. It's in there. Notice how it looks washed out in there, but it's having trouble displaying it because it's expecting an EXR, which is what the native is. Now, I might be able to fix that, but honestly, it's not worth the energy. I just would rather have this side by side. So goodbye. You are the weakest link. All right, so this is going to be a little bit different. You delete this. Oh. There we go. Oh, really? I accidentally launched the media encoder. All this to quit out as soon as it opens. All right, goodbye. Okay. So key light, that's the first one you want to worry about. Then we'll put the kickers in. Oh yeah, you can. I don't like docking stuff, especially the render view, because every once in a while, if you hit the render view button here and it's already docked somewhere else, you'll come up with an error message at the bottom going, the window's already open, but you're not sure what view it's in. So, and also if it shows up as a tab, which if the tab is not active, it still will come up with an error. So honestly, I prefer the free floating because then I can move it around where I want it. And honestly, I'm always working on 2 monitors. So I'll put this off to the other monitor or put the interface of Maya up on the second monitor, keep this on the more accurate display so it looks better. And honestly, you go anywhere to work, you're going to be working on multiple monitors. Yeah, I mean, it's personal workflow preference. I know there are students that love 4-view and they will put the render view in one of them. It just, I can't work that small. I like to look at the image actual size. Like over here, actual size. I want to see this actual size. I want to see as much real estate as I can to make sure I'm not missing artifacting or, you know, pixels or so. When you put that down so small, you're kind of making the pixels, you're having less pixels in there to look at, and sometimes a shadow might look different in a bigger size. So, like I said, just me. All right, so I'm looking at this. It's slightly above, it's off to the side. I'm going to go wireframe, so I don't really care what it looks like there. And let's bring up ye olde spotlight. So for this, definitely T key for me. Here, where are we going with the spotlight? So they kind of got it off to the side of the head. Yeah, it definitely looks like it's off to one side. So let's play that game. Let's go over here. Like right around where the camera is, elevation wise. That's hilarious. So it's definitely going to be up a little bit. And let's bring it down. And let's hit the render button. So now it's going to take a couple of seconds to pre-cache or kind of pre-rip or pre-render that skin texture. So it doesn't have to convert it all the time. Arnold will write it into a file called a TEX file, which basically kind of pre-processes it. So when you hit the render button, it grabs that rather than going, okay, here's the image. What do I have to do to the image? It kind of has all the information it needs. So I've got it. It's rendering, but it's really weak. There we go. So the thing about subsurface scattering is the more light intensity you throw at it, the more the skin will absorb it, and it'll start to look more like real skin. Right? Went over the top. All right, so now I can kind of go, okay. So as far as my shadow goes, shadow position, not too bad. Maybe I need to bring it around to the front a little bit more. What I'm trying to do is compact that nose shadow, just like it is here. So even though I'm looking at the reference, I'm going, wow, all right, positionally, so what I'm trying to do is get that little bit of shadow from the nose on the right. Now, I've got a razor sharp shadow here under my chin. So basically, I'm looking at this going, all right, I need some more shadow under the chin. So I think I kind of need to have a little more, need to raise that up a little bit more. Now, also notice that my light is hitting the backdrop and I got that shadow from the head going back there. I don't really see that on my reference. So I probably need to use light linking to unlink that key light from the backdrop. But for now, I'm going to leave it on. And what I want to do is I got a little bit of softness from the shadow here. And that's because this key light has a honeycomb on it, which means it's got a little bit of softness. So I'm going to go down under Arnold and give it a little bit of radius. Just a little bit of soften those shadows up a little. Yeah, maybe it needs to be a little softer. So what I want to try to do is balance the shadow I see under the chin with the nose shadow. And honestly, I kind of thought I was closer before. Even though I had a short shadow under the chin, it kind of matched the nose shadow kind of matched a little bit better. And it looks like my light could be a little higher. Now I can always also try increasing the cone because this is default cone. Really don't think that's going to do a whole lot for me. Whee! So I'm going to go back to the default. All right, so time to unlink the key light from the backdrop. Light linking, windows, relationship editors, light linking, light centric, and let's unlink it from the backdrop. And let's add in our kickers. They're going to be our area lights. They're going to be behind the subject. And assume that they are a pair. It's probably same intensity. Whatever you do to one, do to the other, even as far as scale goes. So let's create an Arnold area light. Let's get that Arnold area light up here. If I didn't mention it, now that we're using multiple lights, Maya hates duplicating lights. If you duplicate lights, they may work for a while, but I guarantee you at some point they fail. You can do it in other software packages. You've never been able to do it in Maya. They don't seem to care. That's important. Unlike geometry, there are hidden connections when you duplicate lights that you cannot get to by just deleting construction history or deleting all as far as history goes, like you can with modeling or animation. If you choose to duplicate them, do them at your own peril. I recommend, Frank and Ari will also tell you, don't duplicate lights. Because at some point they fail. And it's always right when you're about to finish your render. Remember, Maya is spiteful. So let's swing this around. That's sort of it. I'm going to actually make this bigger. I'm going to scale this up a little bit more. Right there. And let's give it some intensity. I'm going to get ridiculous just so I can see it. Oh yeah, it's working. Too much. Well, for this, I'm trying to look at what light do I see on the side of the head. Like here, I definitely have shadow because my key light is off to the right side. So what I'm trying to do is get a little bit, I'm noticing some hair light up here. We don't have hair, but I'm just trying to get some bright areas on that side of the head. And I figure if I can sort of get it over here, so it's not quite a rim, it's just more like an accent. So I don't want the same intensity that I would with a rim where I've actually got it like it's burning that edge of the whole body. And I'm starting to get a little too much subsurface scattering in the ear right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do, let's see, 1.6, 1.7. Let's do that. Make it uniform. I'm going to create another light, position it opposite side, give it the same scale. So over here, let's rotate it around. What did I rotate this at? Oh, 138. Let's call it that. 138. Let's go negative 138. So it'll be in the opposite direction. There we go. Let's bring it up. 1.7, I believe, is what I did here. Yep, 1.7. Come back a little bit, come over a little bit. As far as height goes, .2, let's do that. And let's give it the same intensity, what I have here. 300, let's do the same thing here. All right, little bright. Same thing, going to unlink both of those kickers from the backdrop, put a separate light in and control just the backdrop. So going to do the same thing I did. Let's save first because it's Maya. So let's go up, do light linking. And area lights, let's take it off the backdrop. Each one. Let's hit render. Now, notice I'm getting some of that indirect bounce light because it's bouncing off the head going into the backdrop. I could work with that and add another light in, which I may do if I still get too much of this, because that's a really warm browny color almost. If I'm getting too much, I'd have to do the same thing I did with the rabbit. Remember, that's the bounce light or indirect light. I'd have to turn that off in each one of the lights so I don't get that bounce coming off of it. But I'm going to try to work with it, see what I get. Yeah, honestly, I think that's what I'm going to do. I may go, well, I may keep it just square for now and see how that looks. Or I may go round, because sometimes round is just a little nicer as far as the shape of the light. But I'm going to keep it default for now. Let's put it back here. And roughly behind the head. And, well, let's see what we get. All right, so it's not bad. I'm seeing a little bit of blue in that light. So what I'm probably going to do is add a little bit of dark blue in my light. Hopefully that'll neutralize that kind of warm skin color that was bouncing on the background. And also, I just want to be able to pick up that kind of gunmetal gray color that the photographer got for free. That is a little bright, so let's knock that down. Color? Well, I can try and sample the color off of here. Yeah, that's really dark. See, part of the problem is if I sample it right off of there, look at the value. That's like super, super dark. I definitely have to crank that up. And honestly, that's about what the color looks like. So it's that shade of blue I need. And rather than add value to the light, which I almost never do because it just makes it artificially dark, I'd rather lower the intensity of the light. So yeah, a little too bright. Let's try 6. But you can sample colors. I mean, you can take the little eyedropper inside the simple color picker and, go over even outside of Maya and click on it. It doesn't always work, and there's ways around it, which we'll get into when we get into actually sampling color for materials. All right. Still looks a little beige. What if I saturate the color a little more? Nope, that's worse. Desaturate? Yeah, I can really see as it's doing the minimal passes, you can see before it starts blending that in there, that pinky skin color is too much. So let's go into these lights and let's see what happens. Let's keep that. Let's see what happens if I turn off indirect on both these lights. Ah, much better. That's a purer color. All right, so probably go back and work on a couple of other things. From this point, probably go back, start tweaking the key light again. I'm probably not going to tweak those kickers until I get the key light as close as I can get it. For the kickers, I might bring them around to the side just a little more. Oh, we're getting a little subsurface scattering in there, a little bit in there. And I might experiment with like trying to raise that light up a little, maybe move it around to the side. Gives me the shadow that I want, but it doesn't necessarily give me the result. So you move around too many times, I can just go back and Z back. All right, does that make sense? The workflow? Questions?
I had a question about
Yeah.
the so how are you supposed to match like the shadows and stuff if like the facial features are different sizes and such?
Well, we understand. That's a good question. Because we understand that. What you want to do is get as close as you can to the shadows.
To,
Like
the
the jaw
general.
on the male is much broader and not
Yeah.
quite as pointed and delicate as it is on the female. That's why we're getting a longer shadow. He's got like a big, chunky, blocky meathead.
Yeah.
And she has a more delicate chin that she's got distinct jaw lines and it goes into a more of a point, which makes it easier to get that shape. And she is probably sticking her head forward a little, whereas our male is just kind of flat.
Yeah, more relaxed.
Yeah, she would be shoving her head forward to get that shadow. And that's what the photographer's telling her to do. Like what looks good in an actual portrait is usually really uncomfortable for the person in the pose. Because to make it look good for the shot, you got to kind of contort yourself and twist around and bend. So we take all that into consideration. The idea is, do you understand where the main shadows are? And do you have the light? And how are you managing the different lights? Like I had to turn off light linking from the other lights to get that backdrop the way I wanted it. But yeah, that's a really good question. You're just trying to get as close as you can based on what you have to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. No, that's a great question. How are you supposed to match when they're different? This one is actually a little harder to match. Some of the other ones are a little easier. Single light, maybe backlight, rim light, where you got these kickers and they're creating all kinds of extra light. you're not getting the same facial feature landmarks. Good question. Any others? All right. So that is basically synopsis of what you're going to work on in lab. Get help from Ari and Frank if you guys have issues. Try to get at least the first pass or two of the still life for the rabbit. Stop. Get the portrait going. That way, if you have trouble with the skin texture not showing up or any other trouble, you can get that ironed out in lab before you go home and work on it. So this won't be due till Sunday night. So you have like an extra day over the weekend to work on it. I know you guys don't have animation tomorrow either, do you?
No.
Good. Yeah. So don't do a total brain dump. Just, go home, relax, and then work on your stuff. All right. Let's see. First part of the lecture. Yep. All done. HDR processed. Nice. Okay. All right. Let's go to dinner, lunch, whatever you want to call it. 4:55. Come back to lab at 5:55. Oddly specific. There you go. All right. So have a great weekend if I don't see you guys. We'll lock, I'll be here